A humble mechanic is publicly humiliated by the love of his life, but years later, he builds an empire, only to face her again when she needs him the most. What will he do? The morning sun filtered through the cracked window of Miguel's modest room, casting light on a carefully pressed suit hanging on the back of his door. Today was the day he had dreamed of for years. The day he would marry Clara, the woman who had captivated his heart despite their vastly different worlds. Miguel, a humble mechanic, had fallen for Clara's charm and grace, believing their love could transcend the barriers of wealth and status. The tiny church was packed with guests. Clara's side was filled with elegantly dressed relatives and friends, their laughter and polished appearances starkly contrasting the simpler attire of Miguel's family and friends, who sat quietly, their hands folded tightly in their laps. Miguel stood nervously at the altar, his palms sweating as he adjusted his tie for the third time. When the church doors opened and Clara entered, the room fell silent. She was radiant in a flowing white gown, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. Miguel's heart swelled with emotion as she made her way down the aisle. To him, she wasn't just a vision of beauty. She was the promise of a future that would unite their two disparate lives. But as she reached the altar, Clara's expression changed. Her radiant smile faded, replaced by a look of cold indifference. Miguel noticed it immediately, his joy giving way to a creeping sense of unease. "I can't do this," Clara said, her voice ringing out in the silent church. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she turned to face the guests. "I can't marry someone like him." Her words struck Miguel like a physical blow. The room blurred as humiliation and heartbreak washed over him. He looked at Clara, searching her face for any sign of the woman he thought he knew, but her gaze was distant, almost cruel. "I deserve someone who matches my status, someone who can give me the life I'm accustomed to," she continued, her voice steady and unapologetic. "I thought I could overlook it, but the truth is, Miguel is beneath me." Laughter erupted from some corners of Clara's side of the audience, the sound cutting through Miguel like a blade. He glanced at his mother, Dona Luzia, whose face was a mixture of shock and fury. She stood as if to defend her son, but Miguel caught her eye and gave a slight shake of his head. He didn't want her to escalate the scene. Clara stepped away from the altar, her heels clicking sharply against the stone floor as she strode toward the exit. The congregation sat frozen, unsure of what to do. Miguel remained standing at the altar, his hands clenched into fists, his heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. The rain began to pour as Miguel stepped outside the church, the guests still murmuring behind him. The gray clouds mirrored the storm brewing in his chest. The humiliation, the pain, it was too much. He walked aimlessly through the empty streets, his once pristine suit now drenched and clinging to his skin. That night, Miguel sat alone in his small room, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day replayed endlessly in his mind, each memory a dagger to his pride. For the first time in his life, Miguel felt utterly broken. But deep within him something stirred, a flicker of resolve that refused to be extinguished. It whispered that this wasn't the end, that this humiliation could be the catalyst for something greater. Miguel didn't know how or when, but he swore to himself that one day, he would rise above this moment. And when he did, he would no longer be defined by the rejection of a woman who couldn't see his worth. The days following the wedding were a blur of silence and shame for Miguel. In the small town where he lived, news traveled fast, and whispers followed him wherever he went. Each step through the cobblestone streets felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of his humiliation had sunk into the ground beneath him. At home, Dona Luzia watched her son with worry. Miguel barely ate, barely spoke. His once calloused hands, always busy fixing engines or tinkering with ideas, now rested idle on the table. She had always admired her son's resilience, but now, even that seemed buried under the wreckage of Clara's betrayal. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden glow over their small, modest home, Dona Luzia sat across from Miguel with a determined look. "Meu filho," she began, her voice soft but firm, You cannot let her words destroy you. Miguel glanced at her but said nothing. His mother continued, her eyes shining with both anger and love. You are not insignificant, Miguel. Your worth isn't determined by her or anyone else. You have a gift, a determination that can take you far. Don't let this be the end. Her words struck something deep within Miguel. He looked at her, his mother, who had raised him alone after his father's death, who had sacrificed so much to give him every opportunity. She deserved better than this defeated version of her son. That night, Miguel sat at his small workbench, the place where he had spent countless hours repairing engines and dreaming of a better life. Among the tools and scraps of metal, his gaze fell on a crumpled newspaper he had picked up weeks ago. The headline caught his eye. Opportunities in the capital. A new life awaits. For the first time in days, Miguel felt a flicker of hope. The capital was a world away from the judgmental eyes of his small town. It was a place where he could start fresh, where no one knew his name or his past. Perhaps it was there that he could find the success he had always dreamed of. The next morning, Miguel announced his decision to Dona Lucia. She looked at him with a mix of pride and worry. It won't be easy, she said, handing him a neatly packed bag. But I know you'll find your way. You always do. At the bus station, Miguel hugged his mother tightly, her embrace grounding him as he prepared to leave everything he knew behind. I'll make you proud, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You already do, she replied, wiping away a tear. Just remember, Miguel, no matter how hard it gets, you have the strength to overcome it. The bus ride to the capital was long, the scenery changing from rolling hills to sprawling highways. Miguel stared out the window, his mind racing with equal parts fear and determination. He didn't know what awaited him in the city, but he knew one thing. He would never let anyone make him feel worthless again. When the bus finally pulled into the bustling terminal of the capital, Miguel stepped off into a sea of strangers. The air was different here, charged with energy and possibilities. The noise of honking cars, street vendors shouting their wares, and the hum of hurried footsteps overwhelmed his senses, but it also filled him with a sense of opportunity. Carrying his bag over his shoulder, Miguel took his first steps into this new world. He didn't have much, just a few reis in his pocket, a bag of clothes, and a heart full of determination. But for the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't felt since the wedding: hope. Miguel's first few weeks in the capital were a whirlwind of challenges. The towering skyscrapers, bustling streets, and constant noise were a stark contrast to the quiet, familiar lanes of his hometown. Everything seemed bigger, faster, and harsher. Yet, beneath the city's chaos, Miguel saw a glimmer of possibility. If only he could find his footing. He had rented a small room in a run-down boarding house on the outskirts of the city. The space was barely larger than a closet, with peeling paint and a single flickering light bulb, but it was all he could afford. Each night, as he lay on the thin mattress, the sounds of the city filtered through the cracked window. Car horns, distant laughter, and the occasional shout. It was both unsettling and oddly comforting, a reminder that he was in a place where anything could happen. Finding work proved to be his first and greatest hurdle. Miguel roamed the city daily, clutching copies of his resume, though it was sparse, listing only his years as a mechanic. He visited garages, workshops, and even construction sites, but rejection followed him everywhere. No experience in the city. We're not hiring right now. Maybe try again next month. The days blurred together in a haze of unanswered questions and empty promises. His meager savings dwindled quickly, and hunger became a constant companion. On some nights, a stale piece of bread and water were all he had to quiet the rumbling in his stomach. Despite the setbacks, Miguel refused to give up. One afternoon, after yet another rejection, he sat on a bench in a crowded square, watching the city's life unfold around him. Street vendors called out their prices, children chased each other around a fountain, and businessmen hurried past with their phones pressed to their ears. Among them, Miguel noticed a well-dressed man examining the menu at a nearby food cart. The man was Enrique, a regular customer at the cart. When the vendor handed Enrique his order, Miguel's stomach growled audibly. Embarrassed, Miguel quickly looked away, but Enrique had heard it. He turned, his sharp eyes studying the young man sitting on the bench. "Hungry?" Enrique asked, stepping closer. Miguel hesitated, then nodded. Enrique handed him half of his sandwich. "It's not much, but it's better than nothing." Miguel accepted it gratefully, savoring the first decent meal he'd had in days. As they talked, Enrique learned about Miguel's struggles and was intrigued by his determination. Miguel shared his background as a mechanic and his dreams of building something meaningful, though he admitted he didn't yet know how. "There's something about you," Enrique said, leaning back against the bench. "You're not just here to survive. You want more. I respect that." Enrique introduced himself as an entrepreneur who had once faced similar struggles. He had come to the city with nothing but a dream and had slowly built a small business empire. He saw potential in Miguel's grit and offered to help. "You'll need to prove yourself," Enrique said. "But if you're willing to work hard, I can give you the guidance you need." Miguel agreed without hesitation. Enrique's mentorship became a lifeline, offering him not only practical advice but also a sense of hope he hadn't felt in weeks. Enrique taught Miguel how to think beyond survival, how to see opportunities where others saw obstacles. With Enrique's encouragement, Miguel began to revisit the skills he had as a mechanic. He noticed a gap in the city's market: affordable, reliable repair services for middle-class workers who couldn't afford the high prices of big garages. Slowly, an idea began to take shape. Though he still struggled with daily expenses and the weight of his past, Miguel felt a spark of purpose reigniting within him. Each day, he worked tirelessly, combining Enrique's guidance with his own determination. The city's challenges no longer felt insurmountable. They were stepping stones on a path he was finally beginning to see. With Enrique's guidance, Miguel began to build his vision. Every evening, after long days spent juggling odd jobs to make ends meet, he sat with a notebook filled with sketches, ideas, and plans. His concept was simple but powerful: a network of affordable repair shops offering top-quality service to people like him, those often overlooked by large, high-priced garages. Enrique, impressed by Miguel's determination, invited him to a networking event. "You'll meet people who could help you," Enrique explained. "Investors, business owners, people who've been where you are now." Miguel hesitated. The idea of standing in a room full of polished professionals was intimidating. He owned one suit, a thrifted piece he had ironed meticulously, and he worried it wouldn't be enough. Still, he knew this was an opportunity he couldn't afford to miss. The event was held in a sleek, modern co-working space in the heart of the city. Miguel felt out of place as soon as he entered. The room buzzed with chatter and laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the hum of expensive shoes on polished floors. Enrique introduced him to several people, many of whom were polite but dismissive when they learned of Miguel's humble background. But one investor, a woman named Gabriela, listened intently as Miguel described his idea. Her sharp eyes studied him, and when he finished, she smiled. "I like your vision," she said. "It's practical and fills a gap in the market. But what makes you think you're ready to execute it?" Miguel took a deep breath. "Because I know what it's like to have nothing and to need someone to believe in you. I know the people I want to serve because I've been one of them my whole life." Gabriela nodded thoughtfully. "Let's stay in touch," she said, handing him her card. It wasn't a promise, but it was a start. Encouraged by the experience, Miguel threw himself into refining his business plan. Enrique helped him draft proposals, and together they identified a small garage in a working-class neighborhood as a potential starting point. The space was modest but functional, with room for expansion. With some savings and a small loan Enrique co-signed, Miguel managed to lease the garage and purchase the necessary tools. He spent weeks cleaning and renovating the space, often working late into the night. The process was exhausting, but each improvement brought him closer to his dream. Opening day came sooner than expected. Miguel had spread the word through flyers and word of mouth, and his first customers trickled in. A teacher with a broken-down car, a delivery driver with a faulty engine, a single mother who couldn't afford the usual repair shop rates. Miguel treated each vehicle with care, his hands steady and skilled as he worked. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Customers appreciated his fair prices, honest assessments, and the personal touch he brought to his work. By the end of the first month, the garage was breaking even, a small but significant victory. But the challenges weren't over. One evening, as Miguel was closing up, he noticed a familiar figure standing by the garage door. It was Clara. "Miguel," she said, her voice smooth but tentative. "I heard about what you're doing. I wanted to see it for myself." Miguel's chest tightened. He hadn't seen her since the wedding, and her sudden presence reopened old wounds. Still, he forced a neutral expression and gestured toward the garage. "It's nothing fancy, but it's mine." Clara smiled, her eyes scanning the space. "You've done well for yourself. I always knew you had potential." Her words felt hollow, but Miguel didn't respond. He couldn't tell if she was here out of genuine interest or ulterior motives. Either way, he had no intention of letting her distract him. As she left, Miguel stood in the doorway, watching her disappear into the night. He felt a surge of pride, not because of her words, but because he knew, deep down, that he didn't need her approval anymore. For the first time, Miguel felt like he was on solid ground. His business was growing, and his vision was becoming a reality. The journey was far from over, but he knew he had taken an important step toward a future he was finally beginning to believe in. Under Enrique's mentorship, Miguel's vision began to take shape. Every day after his long shifts at odd jobs, he worked late into the night, sketching plans for a business that would provide affordable, quality car repairs to the hardworking people of the city. Enrique, impressed by Miguel's resolve, offered him access to a small workspace and introduced him to some of his business contacts. The first garage Miguel opened was modest. Tucked away in a bustling neighborhood, it had space for just 2 cars and barely enough tools to handle basic repairs. Yet, to Miguel, it was a dream materializing, a seed planted in fertile ground. Miguel's reputation grew quickly, thanks to his dedication and honesty. Customers appreciated the way he explained every repair and charged fair prices, a rarity in a city where trust often came at a premium. Word spread, and soon his small garage was busier than he had ever imagined. But success brought its challenges. The garage wasn't equipped to handle the increasing demand, and Miguel often found himself working late into the night, his hands blistered and his back aching. Even with the growing stream of customers, profits were slim. Most of what he earned went back into the business to purchase better tools and upgrade the workspace. One evening after a long day, Enrique stopped by to check on Miguel. He found him under the hood of an old car, grease smudged across his face and arms. "You've done well," Enrique said, leaning against the workbench. "But if you want to grow, you need to think bigger." Miguel wiped his hands on a rag and sighed. "No. But expanding takes money, and I'm barely getting by as it is." Enrique nodded thoughtfully. "What about investors? I know a few people who might be interested in funding someone like you. Someone who's proven they can deliver." The idea of seeking investors terrified Miguel. He had spent his life avoiding risks, relying on hard work to move forward. Trusting strangers with a stake in his business felt like a gamble. But Enrique's confidence in him was infectious, and Miguel couldn't deny that expansion was necessary. After days of preparation, Miguel met with 2 potential investors. He walked into the meeting with a mix of determination and anxiety, carrying a folder filled with financial reports, customer testimonials, and a detailed plan for the garage's growth. As he presented his ideas, he saw the skepticism in their eyes shift to interest. By the end of the meeting, one of the investors agreed to fund Miguel's expansion. The terms were strict, and the pressure to succeed was immense, but Miguel felt a renewed sense of purpose. With the funds secured, He leased a larger space in a more accessible location and hired 2 assistants to help manage the workload. The new garage opened to great anticipation. Miguel worked tirelessly to ensure every detail was perfect, from the layout of the workspace to the customer experience. On opening day, dozens of customers lined up, many of them loyal clients from his first garage. The demand was overwhelming but exhilarating. Meanwhile, Miguel began receiving messages from an unexpected source. Clara. The first message was simple. I heard about your success. Congratulations. Miguel read it twice, unsure of how to feel. She had ignored him for years, yet now, when his fortunes were changing, she reached out. He decided not to respond, focusing instead on his growing business. But Clara was persistent. Over the weeks, her messages became more frequent and personal. Miguel couldn't ignore the part of him that still felt wounded by her betrayal, but he also recognized that his success no longer hinged on her approval. One evening, as he closed up the garage, Miguel received a call from Enrique. You've built something incredible, Enrique said, pride evident in his voice. But this is just the beginning. Remember, Miguel, success is about more than proving people wrong. It's about creating something that lasts. Miguel stood in the quiet garage, Enrique's words resonating deeply. For so long, he had been driven by the desire to rise above his past and prove his worth. Now, standing amid the hum of his growing success, he realized his journey was no longer about Clara or the humiliation he had endured. It was about building a future defined by integrity, resilience, and purpose. Miguel's new garage quickly became the talk of the neighborhood. Cars lined up outside as word spread about his affordable and reliable services. Customers praised not just his work but also his honesty, a rare quality in a city where most mechanics charged exorbitant fees without explanation. Miguel's name became synonymous with trust, and the steady stream of clients allowed him to reinvest in better equipment and hire more staff. With the business thriving, Miguel found himself busier than ever. His days were consumed by running the garage, mentoring his employees, and managing the growing expectations of his customers. The pressure was intense, but every night, as he locked up the garage, he felt a deep sense of pride. He was no longer the man humiliated at the altar. He was a self-made entrepreneur, respected and admired. One evening, as Miguel finished a long day, his phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at the screen and froze. It was from Clara. Congratulations on your success, Miguel, the message read. I'd love to catch up. It's been too long. Miguel stared at the screen, his emotions swirling. For years, he had imagined what he would say if Clara ever reached out. He had rehearsed speeches in his mind, words sharp enough to cut through the pain she had caused. But now that the moment was here, he felt nothing but indifference. He ignored the message and focused on his work. Yet Clara was persistent. Over the next few weeks, she sent more messages, each one more personal than the last. I'm so proud of how far you've come, she wrote. It reminds me of how much potential I always knew you had. Miguel couldn't help but laugh at the irony. The same woman who had publicly humiliated him was now trying to flatter him. Still, a part of him wondered why she was reaching out. Was it genuine regret, or was there something more behind her sudden interest? The answer came during a quiet afternoon at the garage. Clara showed up unannounced, stepping out of a sleek black car. She looked as polished as ever, her designer dress and confident smile a stark contrast to the oil-stained uniforms of Miguel and his team. Miguel, she said, her voice warm and familiar. It's so good to see you. Miguel wiped his hands on a rag and nodded politely. Clara, this is a surprise. She glanced around the garage, her eyes scanning the equipment and bustling staff. You've done well for yourself, she said, her tone almost impressed. I always knew you had it in you. Miguel crossed his arms, leaning casually against a workbench. What brings you here, Clara? She hesitated, her confident demeanor faltering for just a moment. I wanted to apologize, she said finally, for what happened at the wedding. I was immature and selfish. I didn't appreciate who you were. And I made a terrible mistake." Her words were smooth, practiced. Miguel felt a flicker of something. Was it satisfaction? Vindication? But he kept his expression neutral. "That was a long time ago," he said evenly. "I've moved on." Clara smiled, stepping closer. "I can see that. But I was hoping we could start fresh. I'd love to reconnect." Miguel could see through her act. Clara's apology wasn't about him. It was about what he represented now. Success, status, the very things she had once dismissed him for lacking. "I appreciate the apology," Miguel said, his tone calm but firm. "But I'm not the same person I was back then. And I'm not interested in revisiting the past." Clara's smile wavered, but she quickly recovered. "Course, understand. But if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." As she turned to leave, Miguel felt a sense of closure he hadn't expected. For years, he had been haunted by the humiliation Clara had caused. But now, standing in the garage he had built with his own hands, her presence felt insignificant. That evening, as he reflected on the encounter, Miguel realized something important. Clara's opinion no longer mattered to him. Her validation wasn't necessary. He had built a life and a business that stood on its own merits, and nothing she said or did could take that away. Miguel's business continued to thrive. The garage, once a modest operation, had expanded into a well-equipped facility with a growing team. Customers from all over the city sought his services, and local media began to take notice. Articles praised his work ethic and the affordable prices that made quality car repairs accessible to everyone. Miguel's name became synonymous with integrity. With success came new opportunities. One afternoon, Enrique stopped by the garage with exciting news. "There's a group of investors interested in your business," Enrique said, handing Miguel a sleek folder. "They see the potential for expansion, franchises, advertising, the whole package. They're willing to fund it." Miguel flipped through the proposal, his heart racing. The idea of expanding his business across the city, or even beyond, was both thrilling and daunting. Yet, as he read further, doubts crept in. The investors' vision for the business clashed with Miguel's values. They wanted to prioritize profit over affordability, targeting wealthier customers and moving the business into more lucrative neighborhoods. It was a far cry from the mission that had driven Miguel to start the garage in the first place. Enrique noticed Miguel's hesitation. "It's a big opportunity," he said. "But it's also a big decision. Don't rush it." Over the next few days, Miguel wrestled with the dilemma. Expanding the business meant reaching more customers and creating jobs, but it also risked alienating the very community that had supported him from the start. He spent sleepless nights pacing his small office, the contract lying untouched on his desk. One evening, as he worked late at the garage, Dona Luzia arrived with dinner. She placed the food on the workbench and sat beside him, her presence a comforting reminder of home. "You've been quiet lately," she said, watching him. "What's on your mind?" Miguel explained the proposal, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "It's a chance to grow, May. To make something even bigger. But I don't know if it's worth the cost." Dona Luzia listened carefully, her weathered hands resting on his. "Miguel," she said softly, "you've built something honest and good. Don't let anyone take that from you. Success isn't just about how far you go. It's about staying true to who you are." Her words stayed with Miguel as he reviewed the proposal one last time. The next morning he called Enrique. "I can't do it," Miguel said firmly. "The terms don't align with what I believe in." Enrique sighed, but there was admiration in his voice. "I figured you'd say that. It's why I respect you, Miguel. You're not just building a business. You're building a legacy." Despite the decision, Miguel knew the challenges weren't over. Rejecting the investors meant relying solely on the garage's existing income to fund any future growth. It was a risk, but one he was willing to take to preserve the values that had brought him this far. That week, Miguel gathered his team and shared his vision for the garage. He spoke about the importance of staying affordable, supporting the community, and maintaining the trust they had worked so hard to earn. His words resonated with his employees, who were proud to be part of something meaningful. Meanwhile, Clara's presence lingered on the edges of Miguel's life. She sent occasional messages, each one more insistent than the last. When he didn't respond, she tried a different approach, reaching out to mutual acquaintances and attending events where she knew he would be present. At one such event, Clara approached Miguel with a bright smile. "You're making waves in the business world," she said. "It's impressive." Miguel nodded politely, keeping the conversation brief. Though her persistence annoyed him, he refused to let it distract him from his goals. As the garage continued to grow on its own terms, Miguel felt a deep sense of pride. He had faced a difficult choice and emerged with his values intact. It wasn't the easiest path, but it was the one that felt right. The day of the city's prestigious business gala arrived, an event that gathered entrepreneurs, investors, and media from across the region. Miguel had been invited as a guest of honor, his story of resilience and success having captured public attention. Though he was nervous about mingling with the city's elite, he knew this was an opportunity to showcase not only his achievements but also the values that defined his business. Dressed in a tailored suit Enrique had insisted he wear, Miguel entered the grand ballroom, its chandeliers casting golden light across the room. He was greeted by warm applause and congratulatory handshakes as people recognized him. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged in a space that had once seemed so unreachable. As the evening progressed, Miguel mingled with attendees, sharing his journey and insights. Yet, amidst the celebratory atmosphere, a familiar voice broke through the crowd. "Miguel," Clara called out, her tone sweet and disarming. She approached with a confident smile, dressed in an elegant gown that sparkled under the ballroom lights. "You've certainly come a long way." Miguel's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "Clara," he said politely, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I wouldn't miss the chance to celebrate your success," she replied, her words dripping with charm. "It's truly inspiring how far you've come. And I've been thinking, maybe we should start fresh. Leave the past behind." Miguel raised an eyebrow, incredulous. "Fresh? Clara, I think we both know why you're here." Her smile faltered for a moment before she regained her composure. "I made mistakes, Miguel. I see that now. But I also see what we could build together. With your business growing so rapidly, imagine what we could accomplish as partners." Her words confirmed what Miguel had suspected all along. Her interest wasn't genuine remorse or reconciliation. It was ambition, fueled by the allure of his success. Miguel took a deep breath, his voice calm but firm. "Clara, I've built this business with honesty and hard work. It represents everything I value, everything you once dismissed as insignificant. I don't need your validation or your partnership." Clara's smile froze, her mask slipping. "You think you're better than me now," she said, her voice low and sharp. "Don't forget where you came from." Miguel met her gaze steadily. "I'll never forget where I came from. It's why I know the difference between someone who believes in me and someone who only wants to use me." Their exchange caught the attention of nearby attendees, the murmurs of the crowd growing louder. Miguel turned away, refusing to give her another moment of his time. As he walked toward the stage to deliver his speech, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. For the first time, he had faced Clara without the weight of his past holding him back. At the podium, Miguel spoke with heartfelt sincerity. He shared the struggles and lessons that had shaped him, emphasizing the importance of staying true to one's values. His words resonated deeply with the audience, earning a standing ovation by the time he finished. As Miguel stepped off the stage, Enrique greeted him with a proud grin. "You handled that brilliantly," Enrique said. "Both the speech and other matters." Miguel laughed softly, the tension of the evening finally easing. "It feels good to close that chapter," he admitted. The gala ended with Miguel receiving a special recognition award for his contributions to the community. As he accepted the honor, he couldn't help but think about how far he had come, not just professionally but personally. He had grown beyond the pain of Clara's betrayal, finding strength in his values and the life he had built. That night, as Miguel returned home, he felt a profound sense of peace. He no longer needed to prove anything to Clara or to anyone else. His success was its own reward, and he knew he was on a path that truly mattered. The morning after the gala, Miguel sat in his office, surrounded by framed photographs of the garage's journey. One image caught his attention, a picture of the original, cramped workspace where his dream had first taken shape. Seeing it filled him with a mix of pride and longing. He realized it was time to give back to the community that had shaped him. Miguel began planning a new initiative, expanding his business model to bring affordable, high-quality car repair services to underserved communities like his hometown. It wasn't just about business. It was about creating opportunities for others who, like him, had once felt overlooked. He shared the idea with Enrique, who immediately supported the plan. "This isn't just growth, Miguel," Enrique said. "This is a legacy." Miguel's first step was to return to his hometown, a place he hadn't visited since the wedding. The drive there was both nostalgic and emotional. The streets, the old buildings, even the smell of the air brought back memories of simpler times, and the challenges he had faced. But now, he was returning not as the humiliated groom but as a successful entrepreneur. When Miguel arrived, the townspeople greeted him warmly. Many had followed his journey through local news and social media, and their pride in his success was palpable. Among them was Dona Luzia, who welcomed him home with open arms. "I always knew you'd do something special," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "But seeing it happen is even better than I imagined." Miguel announced his plan to open a new garage in the town, one that would provide not only services but also training programs for young mechanics. He wanted to give the next generation the tools to build their futures, just as he had. The response was overwhelming. Neighbors volunteered to help renovate the chosen site, while local youth eagerly signed up for the training program. The sense of community was stronger than ever, and Miguel felt a deep connection to the place that had once been the source of his greatest pain. Clara's family, still living in the town, heard about Miguel's plans. Though Clara had moved to another city, her parents approached Miguel, offering congratulations. It was an awkward interaction, but Miguel remained gracious. He knew he had outgrown the need for resentment. As the new garage neared completion, Miguel hosted a small celebration to thank everyone who had contributed. Standing before the crowd, he spoke about the journey that had brought him back home. "This town gave me my start," Miguel said, his voice steady. "And now it's time to give back. This isn't just a garage, it's a place for growth, learning, and opportunity. Together, we can build something that lasts." The crowd erupted into applause, and Miguel felt a wave of fulfillment unlike anything he had ever experienced. He looked at his mother, who stood at the front, beaming with pride. This was the legacy he had dreamed of, one built not on vengeance or proving others wrong, but on lifting others up. Months passed, and the garage in Miguel's hometown became a thriving hub of activity. The once quiet building now buzzed with the sounds of clanging tools, laughter, and the eager chatter of young mechanics learning the trade. Miguel had achieved more than he ever imagined, not just for himself but for the people who shared his roots. The training program he implemented attracted participants from neighboring towns. Young men and women, many of whom had struggled to find stable opportunities, now had a path to secure employment and a brighter future. Miguel personally mentored some of the trainees, sharing not just technical skills but also lessons on perseverance and integrity. One day, as Miguel walked through the garage, he paused to observe a group of trainees working together to repair an old engine. Their dedication reminded him of the young man he once was, hungry for success, determined to make something of himself. It was a full-circle moment, one that filled him with gratitude. The community had embraced the garage as more than just a business. It was a symbol of hope. Parents who once doubted their children's potential now saw them thriving. Local businesses partnered with the garage, creating a ripple effect of economic growth in the area. Miguel's vision was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone. At the end of a particularly busy day, Miguel received a visit from Enrique, who had come to see the impact of their efforts. As they walked through the bustling workspace, Enrique smiled, clearly impressed. "You've built something extraordinary here, Miguel," Enrique said. "This isn't just a garage. It's a legacy." Miguel nodded, his gaze sweeping across the garage. "It's not just mine," he replied. "It belongs to all of us." Enrique placed a hand on Miguel's shoulder. "You've done more than rebuild your life. You've shown others what's possible. That's the kind of success that lasts." Later that evening, Miguel sat with his mother on the porch of their family home. The stars above were bright, and the sounds of the town, children laughing, neighbors chatting, created a comforting backdrop. "You've made me so proud, meu filho," Dona Luzia said, her voice filled with emotion. "But more than that, you've made this town proud." Miguel smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. "I couldn't have done it without you, May. You believed in me when no one else did." As they sat together, Miguel thought about the journey that had brought him here. The pain of Clara's betrayal, the struggles in the city, the hard decisions. Each moment had shaped him, pushing him to grow and find his true purpose. The next day, Miguel stood before a group of trainees at the garage, ready to deliver a speech. His voice was steady, his words heartfelt. "Life will test you," he began. "It will knock you down, make you question your worth. But it's not the fall that defines you, it's how you rise." This garage isn't just a place for fixing cars. It's a place for building futures, for proving that no matter where you come from, you can create something extraordinary. The room erupted into applause, and Miguel felt a wave of emotion. He had not only risen above his own challenges but had also created a foundation for others to do the same. His journey was no longer about proving himself. It was about inspiring others to believe in their own potential. As Miguel looked out at the crowd of young faces, he realized that his story was far from over. It was just the beginning of a larger legacy, one that would ripple through the community and beyond. Do you believe that the greatest challenges in life can shape us into something extraordinary? Miguel's journey from betrayal to triumph reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there's an opportunity to rise stronger, wiser, and with purpose. How would you handle facing the very person who once broke you? Would you seek revenge or choose a higher path? Click the video on your screen now to continue this journey of resilience and self-discovery. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that push us to rethink what's possible and remind us of the power of perseverance. Let's keep learning and growing together.